Today we're covering our second theory of the semester, and that's going to be expectancy violations theory. Judy Burgoon is our expectancy violation theorist. Now, we can really think of each of these theories as really kind of a lens for understanding something about communication, right? And each theory takes an angle of some kind, right? That says, what happens if we view communication through this lens? Right, so we go back to our map metaphor, right? It's different ways of perceiving of the same space. What expectancy violation theory is interested in is what is the relationship between personal space and communication? How do the two influence each other? And not only personal space, but specifically our expectations surrounding personal space. This is always a theory that students seem to like quite a bit because it's quite a bit of relatability to our own everyday life. So what is personal space? Personal space is what we call the invisible variable volume of space surrounding an individual that defines that individual's preferred distance to others. So, right, there's some kind of bubble around us that we like to keep to ourselves. We have a preferred distance from other people. Now, this preferred distance is dictated by cultural norms. It's different in different kinds of places. So, I don't know if you've ever been to another country, right? I've been to Italy before, and it's surprising when you meet people sometimes that they'll want to give you a kiss on the cheek, for example, people you just met. As someone who comes from a culture whereby personal space is something a bit more as distant, perhaps. Like it feels a little bit odd, I guess, to have people in your personal space in that kind of way. Personal space is something that we're always in constant negotiation with. And it's really a tension of two things, right? It's, first of all, our desire for privacy versus our desire for affiliation, right? We don't want to be on a deserted island all alone without anybody around, right? That's the most personal space we could get. But at the same time, we don't want people all up on us all the time. And so our own definition of what personal space is dictated by where we really draw that line between affiliation and privacy and kind of the culture in which we come out of. There are certain sort of cultural norms that we're supposed to follow that tell us what it is polite personal space with someone else. Oh, there we go. I was saying that before. It was actually up here. So, we look to proxemics as a way to really begin talking about personal space. And proxemics is the study of how we negotiate personal space. Edward Hall developed this and turned it into a science of kind. And Edward Hall developed 4 different proxemic zones, which is how we communicate with each other within each zone is really important. Our first is what we call our intimate distance, 0 to 18 inches. So if you, 18 inches is not that long, 1.5 feet or so. And if I were to ask you who are the people you allow into your intimate distance, there's probably going to not be too many people that you say you would, right? Family members, significant others, maybe a good friend or two, right? When someone's in our intimate distance, we tend to experience some kind of physiological arousal. So, right, if someone's in your intimate space, right, if it's a family member, right, you may feel warmth, for example, happiness, love, right? If it's a romantic partner, right, you may feel a certain degree of excitement if someone is in your intimate distance. If it's someone who you don't like, right, you may get angry, right, a certain kind of physiological arousal in that way, and we want to push people out of your intimate distance. Now, we've probably all had examples of people violating our intimate distance. I don't know if anyone's a Seinfeld watcher, right, but there was the close talker in one episode where he'd always get up in your face when he talked to people, and it really rubs people the wrong way. Our intimate distance is something that we tend to protect, and we try not to let people within our intimate distance unless it's absolutely necessary or unless we have that relationship with them. There's also a personal distance, right, which is 18 to 4 feet. This is where we allow people who we are friendly or comfortable with, right? Just friends in general. So if you're in a classroom, for example, you're likely going to be within 4 feet of someone else that you're sitting next to, but you have some kind of relationship with that person, right? And so 18 inches to 4 feet, we let up a bit from our intimate zone, right? We're not as rigid about regulating that personal distance as we are within our intimate zone, but still, right? Like, we don't want people that we don't know all that well to be within our personal distance. Next, we have a social distance, which is 4 feet to 10 feet. 10 feet is the size of a basketball hoop, right? And so you can reasonably think about like that as maybe a point of reference for you to help understand your social distance. With a social distance, right, it's just dictated by social norms. Generally, we allow about anyone within 4 to 10 feet of us, and we really give up regulating that in any kind of meaningful way, the way that we do personal distance. And finally is our public distance, which is anything beyond 10 feet. Now, what happens at 10 feet is something interesting. Rather than who it is that you allow in, right, you're interested in who it is you keep out. So, the same way I ask, who do you allow within 0 to 18 inches of yourself? You have a handful of people, right? Well, who are the people that you wouldn't want to be within 10 feet of, right? And it's probably close to the same kind of number. People that you've had fights with, maybe, ex-boyfriend, girlfriends, for example, or ex-wives or husbands, people who you really, really dislike. And maintaining that public distance, right, like it's after 10 feet, right, we give up all control of who can be within a certain kind of personal space to us. But before that, right, we regulate it pretty regularly. So what is expectancy violation theory then? First of all, it's important to remember that it offers soft determinism rather than hard universal laws. And a lot of that's because of the cultural norms surrounding personal space. Every culture is different. And so we don't have the general, while this is an objective theory, we don't quite reach that criteria of generalizability to be able to talk about all things across all times here. So at the core of expectancy violation theory is this idea that we have certain expectations about how our personal space will be dealt with. We predict people will act towards us in certain kinds of ways. Our expectations are based on a couple of different things, right? It's based on the context, right? So some kind of context, we have different kinds of expectations. First of all, I want to say, when you're in a relationship, when you have expectations, it's important to say it's what we're predicting to occur, not necessarily what you're hoping will occur, right? So based on context, you have certain rules about how it is that you think people will engage you in your personal space. So if you're in the library, for example, we have a very good odds are, right, that people are going to give you personal space, lots of personal space, for example, right? And so if someone came and sits right next to you in a library that's not very full, right, that would be a violation of what it was that you were expecting. Now we can move that context to other places, and we have wildly different expectations about how people will treat our personal space. So think about going to a football game, for example. Right, you're next to people, right? People are sandwiched in, you're high-fiving people, right? People next to you that you might not even know. And based on that context, we have very different expectations about how people will treat our personal space as opposed to a library. Now think about like a dance club, right? Even more so, right? Like you may dance with people that you don't know, for example, and all I guess expectations about having any kind of like control over your intimate zone may be completely gone in that particular kind of context. So where you go determines how people are going to react, what kind of expectations you have about people treating your personal space. We also have a relationship with people, right? A relationship with people that determines what our expectations are. So, for example, I would expect, right, if I were to see my wife at the mall, I would expect a very different kind of treatment of my personal space than I would if I were to see a student. We have a very different relationship. And I mean, you are always someone to someone else, right? Everyone you know, you're someone to. And we negotiate, right, what we're allowed to do with personal space within those particular kind of relationships. Also, communicator characteristics might tell us quite a bit about what we could expect, right? When we talk about that, we're talking about demographic type of information, right? Your age, your gender, your place of birth, your socioeconomic status, etc. These are all wrapped up into it as well. So, for example, my son, who's 4 years old, I've used him before in another example, right, if he were to walk up to someone he didn't know and give them a hug, I imagine that wouldn't be seen as too threatening, right? It'd probably be something that would be kind of cute. But if I were to do that, that's something that would probably come off a bit creepy, because you have certain expectations based on the communicator characteristic of a 4-year-old that would be very different than the communicator characteristics of a 30-something-year-old male. All right, I'll be right back. We're at our 10 minutes. We'll continue this.